Hey, hey, hey. Good day, Center for Spiritual Living, Palm Desert and beyond. How are you today? Brother Daryl, are you there? Reverend Daryl Jones? Let me see your beautiful face. Good day, Center for Spiritual Living, Palm Desert and beyond. Oh, there you are. Got a little echo, though. Brother Daryl, are you there? Reverend Daryl Jones? Let me see your beautiful face. There, yeah. Hey, Trey, can we do anything about that echo? Oh, there you are. Got a little echo, though.
I think the only reason it would be echoing is he playing the video on his end?
Oh, yeah. Oh, maybe. Hey, Trey, can we do anything about that echo?
Maybe. Yeah, here we go.
If we pause that video or mute it, then you'll be good.
Sorry, I had it.
Nice. Bear with us, folks. Here we go. Where Daryl loves to watch himself. He's so vain. Because that is my friend, Reverend Daryl Jones, joining me from Chicago, Illinois. So good morning again, Center for Spiritual Living, Palm Desert, and wherever you're joining us from across the country, hopefully around the world someplace. I know a number of you travel during the summer, and we hope to hear from you during the show. That beautiful man right there is Reverend Daryl Jones. Like I said, Chicago, Illinois, the Reverend Daryl Jones. He's I would say, I mean, if it wasn't instant, it was within a couple of weeks that we fell in love with each other. Mm-hmm. That I fell in love with you. I don't want to talk, I don't want to speak for you, even though I know it's true. We just became instant brothers. And when I was there, I mean, that was in 2002, 2004, I think is when I came out to Chicago. Mm-hmm. And you were with Reverend Mark Anthony Lord at what was then Center for Spiritual Living Chicago, that became the Bodhi Center, and that's where we met.
Yeah, that's where the magic began.
Where the magic began, yeah. So I asked you right before the show started, and by the way, I want to start, folks. I want to let you know that if you would please send in questions, comments, things that we can talk about while we're doing the show, that would be wonderful. Just we've got plenty of material we can talk about, but as Reverend Daryl and I go through the show, any questions help invigorate the conversation. So please join us, and we're so grateful to be here this morning. I guess for you, it's this afternoon.
It is. It's lunchtime here in Chicago.
You got a box of food right there?
No, just some books, moving stuff around. So
here's one of the first things I knew about Reverend Daryl is that he's been in the music business for a long time. You used to have two production companies, didn't you, with Josh?
Yeah, we had. We've had multiple locations for studios. We both had production facilities in our individual homes, and then as our business grew, we actually moved into more dedicated spaces. That became, recording studios, production houses. And
cool.
Josh is still doing it. I don't do it anymore. I still consider myself a musician.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you still play.
I still play.
And at the very last minute, I said, "Hey, Daryl, can you bring in a keyboard?" And you did. So, will you give us a little taste of? Give us a taste of something, and then I'll talk about what you and I used to do when I would just come over to your house and we'd jam.
Okay.
Jam, but will you just give us a taste of just a call in of goodness? Will you give us a little bit of song and prayer?
Sure.
Cool.
Hey, a calling of goodness for you. Taking a minute to breathe in and out and just sit. Sit in this moment, letting everything else melt away so that we can come together and play. Play in the spirit, play in the truth, play in the consciousness of possibility, of creativity, of love, of light and laughter. And so that is what I affirm as I unify with this power and presence, knowing that it is who I am, knowing that it is who Reverend Charles is, who everyone is that is listening to this live or later.
We are all one with the Spirit that is true. We are all one with the Spirit that is good. We are all one with the Spirit that is light. And it is from that light and oneness that I just say, yes, thank you, hallelujah, and amen for this opportunity to connect with my beloved brother and this extended community in a time where we feel so fragmented, drawn away, and put into divisive conversations of who's right and who's wrong. We can come together and say, we are all right. We are all right in heart, all right in spirit, all right in good, all right in God. For that I am thankful. So thankful. And I pass.
Hey. So this is what we used to do. I used to go over to Reverend Daryl's house, and he'd play the keyboard and sing, and then I'd pray and he'd pray, and I'd try and sing. What a beautiful day that we're in the midst of right now. I'm in Palm Desert. My brother Daryl's in Chicago. You are where you are. We're all gathered together. I feel mystical connection. I feel love. I feel the joy that is unfolding over the course of this time that we share. And as always, my intention and my prayer is that what we offer blesses everyone. The blessing to confer love and prosperity upon. It's a good day. It's a good day. My brother, will you bring us home with a little bit of song?
It's a good day. It's a good day to be alive. It's a good day to start to thrive. It's a good day. So let us breathe in. Let us breathe out. Make this day what God's all about. God's all about. So it is. Amen. Amen. Ashe, amen. We let it go. We let it go. We let it go. And so it is.
I'm crying. I can't stop.
Yes.
Thank you, brother.
It's been a minute since I've done that. That was.
It's where the juice is. So where was when I asked you, hey, can you put a keyboard out? Where was the keyboard?
So I have it out in my living room.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, okay, because I've been wanting to get back into music a bit more in my life, and I had the keyboard that you were familiar with. It's kind of old, the buttons you push on it and nothing changes. So I was like, I need something different. And so I got a keyboard last winter, last fall, winter, something like that. And it's just been a blessing in my home. My wife sings as well. So that's been one of our quarantine kind of like alternatives to sitting on the couch and watching endless episodes of something on Netflix. We pull out some music and sing together. So it was in the living room, and my wife and mother-in-law are over. So if we were in the middle of that, there'd be all kinds of cacophony in the background. So I just picked the thing up and shoved it next to my desk.
So is Carrie home right now?
Yes.
Oh, she is? Okay. Well, we might have to ask her to come in at some point.
Okay. I think she'd do it. She went for a walk with my mother-in-law, so I don't know if they're actually in the building right now or gone.
Okay.
So I'll check.
So what's going on in Chicago? How's life?
Today it's hot. It's one of those hot, funky, steamy days in Chicago.
I told you when we talked, that was some of the funkiest humidity I've ever experienced was in Chicago.
Yeah.
Just wearing a hot, wet blanket.
Yeah. It's interestingly been a bit dry here, which it normally isn't. It's usually very, very humid. The humidity is starting to creep in a little bit today. But it's a Friday, man. You know, it's interesting with the whole shelter in place thing and just where people are. Chicago just opened up a few weeks ago to whatever level 3 is. But basically what that meant is that people could be a little bit more present out in the world. So bars and restaurants, if they have outdoor seating spaces, people can go and convene and share a meal together, which is amazing. But the first time I saw it, there's a bar just 2 buildings away and they've got a grill there. When I saw people out, sitting and like having a beer and a burger, like I almost started crying because it was just, you know, you hadn't seen people communing together in a while. So
Sorry, brother. Every once in a while I might go dark, but it's only because I'm looking at the comments. I want to continue to encourage people to come in and ask questions. So that's why. Don't mind me.
No.
You're the highlight.
I'm looking at what Jeff just posted from Adair.
Yeah, and so you know Adair.
I do.
Yeah.
It was my go-to example of foods that I have a challenge controlling or having healthy relationship with, and one of them is potato chips. And yes, Adair, it is still, if it's in the house, it's eaten. So sometimes I just try to keep them away for a little bit. Good to see that you're on the call today.
So burgers bring you to tears right now, though. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, burgers and beers, seeing people break bread. You know, I mean, we always talked about like the importance of sharing a meal with someone, and the conversation that's been on my heart around anything that's going on right now that's stressing us out, whether it be the sheltering in place or Black Lives Matter and race relations, is that community is so important. It's one of the fundamental teachings that I grew up with in my household. And it has nothing to do with spirituality, but it has everything to do with spirituality. I think that's what feeds our spirit. And so when I saw people sitting down outside and like laughing together and sharing, like even now I'm getting a little verklempt in the back of my throat. It was just like, oh my gosh, this is the thing that has been really missing, not only from just our experience, but it's one of the big things for me that contributes so much to my overall sense of wellness and connection to spirit, is connecting to others. So it's been cool, excuse me, to see how the community is slowly starting to open up here in Chicago. So.
Well, that brings me to a point too. Let's just dive in. So you're Black.
I am.
Your wife. We're going to bring a picture up here in just a minute. Trey, will you cue the picture? Don't bring it up yet. Just in a few. You're Black. Your wife is Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if there were ever 2 cultures that are about community and family, it's the 2 of them.
Yeah.
And to be away from each other. Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, it's
painful, isn't it? It feels painful, actually.
It is.
You know, and I'm this had, nothing to do with race, but I'm away from my daughter right now. Once I move down to Palm Desert, and they'll be here in a month or so. But for the last 6 months, it's been hit or miss. And my daughter's going to turn 7, and she's changing every moment. But family is everything to us.
Yeah.
And it hurts right here to be away, and so that's just
Well, I think there's obviously specific ways that different communities come together, right? So in the Jewish faith, that powerful practice of Shabbat on Friday, whether it's just the immediate family or coming together into the synagogue. And it's about a meal, right? So it's like this time of turning away from the work of the week, turning away from the have-tos, and really communing with the Holy Spirit as family, as community.
Yep.
And at least on my father's side of the family, which is the African-American side, food has always been very important.
Hey, Trey, will you pull up the picture right now while Daryl's talking?
And
family right
there.
There
he is.
So we talk us through this picture, will you, brother?
Yeah. So my father just passed away in the beginning of March. He's Reverend Robert E. Jones, so you can see him in his clergy gear there. And he was in a relationship with cancer, in particular mesothelioma, for the past about 16 months before his passing. In between grad school and undergrad, over 55 years ago, 52 years ago, he worked on a construction site spraying asbestos for maybe 3 months while he was figuring out what he was going to do. And in those 3 months, he was exposed enough that for the next 5 decades, he had scarring happening in his lung from the asbestos, which you can't get out, you can't cut out.
Hey. Wow.
And so anyway, he was basically battling that.
Yep.
And this was shortly after he was diagnosed. My wife and I went down. He retired over 7 years ago, but continued to support a church that was without a minister. In terms of community, he recognized the importance of houses of worship being a part of a community. And it wasn't actually the denomination that he was a part of. So he went through another training just so that he could be recognized by the denomination as a legit minister. He was there part-time supporting them.
Yep.
So that's my mom. It's me, my mom, my dad, and my wife, Carrie Jacobson. And I just think community is everything. And obviously, I don't have any siblings. So on some level, this is my immediate community that you see here. This is my immediate family.
Yep.
And all races, all belief systems have some sort of community gathering as a component of their living and lifestyle. And I think when we don't have that, and when individuals don't have it in their life, that's where there's a big pain point that is challenging to their spirit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just think about us coming together, you and me, Charles. We would not have met had it not been for that spiritual community. And it does everything to promote. Obviously, there's always challenges, joking about that passage in the Bible, wherever two or more are gathered, there's love, but also wherever two or more are gathered, there's lots of opinion and people with differing opinions and all kinds of attitude and ego. And that's part of the journey.
So how do we reconcile that, Reverend Harold? That's right. Wherever two or more are gathered, there's God. But maybe part of the idea with that scripture is that within God, there is room for debate and for difficulty and then resolution. What?
I agree. I mean, I've had a handful, I think everyone's clamoring right now. Trying to find something to hold on to, in particular to race relations in this country and the Black Lives Matter movement, and just everyone trying to wrap their head around what are we going to do. I would agree. Most people are probably in agreement, except for a handful of kind of more fringe or extreme ends of the perspective of community would believe, only a handful would believe that nothing needs to change. I think everyone's pretty confident that something needs to shift.
Yeah.
And to me, the thing that's going to create the most shift is dialogue. We do need to look at policy. There is systemic things that are in place that hold people in certain positions or immediately disenfranchise unconsciously members of the community. And it's not just about race, it's also about gender. It's also about location, whether it's rural or urban. There's so many different things that we need to take.
Sexual orientation,
Sexual orientation. Yeah, 100%. So the most important thing to me is dialogue. And the challenge is that the way we, especially in this social media world and environment, the way that we dialogue now, it's all about data and fact points and trying to prove something as right or having a percentage to somehow legitimize what you're saying, which data is important. It just allows us to have an understanding, I think, ultimately outside of our personal anecdotal experience. But what's important is that we have the opportunity to share our anecdotal experiences with one another and to really be heard and listened to.
Yep.
And I don't think that's happening well right now.
Yep. The listening part.
Yeah. I can't remember, were you around when Jim Dethmer was a part of Bodhi?
No.
One of the things that's popped up in the last 10 years at least is this whole idea of like mindful leadership or conscious leadership, and what does that mean? And one of the core things I think of conscious leaders is that they know how to listen, or they're aware of their blind spots when they listen, right?
Mm.
Most people, when they listen to someone talk, they're listening to check facts, right? They're listening to prove or to find right or wrongness in their talk. They're listening to where can I help? What can I fix? What can I do to make a change? Or they're listening to get out of the conversation, right?
Yep.
You know, someone comes up to you, you're just not wanting or willing to have the conversation, so you're listening for the out. And there's nothing really wrong with any of those, but if that's the filter that's always there, when we do try to come into conversation and have a heartfelt dialogue about what we can do on the microscopic community level, whether it's where you live or we're trying to look at our larger United States of America and our governmental systems and our political systems and our business systems, our social systems, and how they are perpetuating something that's maybe not the greatest for a section of our community. If we're coming into that dialogue with those filters and we're not checking them, then it kind of challenges our ability to really have some authentic conversation that will lead to real change.
How do we know how to check them? How do we know what is it a skill set, or do we need to have do we need to have a broader exposure with other people? How do we know how to check those, whatever those mechanisms are, those things?
Well, I don't think it's a couple of things. The first is, and this is to me, to bring it to spiritual practice on some level, as much as I love to pray, and I think that there is everything important about affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment of what we just did, whether you do it, jamming on the ones and twos with some piano, or you're just doing it in silence, is that we're speaking conscious word into the law, into the creative nature of life, and in particular that it is affirmative, right? That it's not a word of negation against anything, it's for something.
Yep.
But that is a directional, it's going out of us. And the practice of meditation, for me at least, is always an invitation to listen. Whether we're listening to an answer from spirit, whether we're listening to the sounds of birds chirping around us outside of our building, or we're listening to a guided meditation, or whatever it may be, the truth is that we are practicing listening. And we may or may not do it well. Our mind may be distracted by thoughts. So many people think that meditation's about stopping your mind. I've yet to stop my mind, and I've been earnestly practicing.
Impossible.
But in that practice of meditation, you're kind of training yourself to learn how to focus and concentrate. And you're training yourself in some self-awareness, whether you realize it or not. When someone says, "Oh man, I can't stop thinking about this thing," it's not so much that you can't stop thinking about this thing, it's that you're aware that, wow, that's the thing in the forefront of my mind. And to practice moving your awareness away from whatever that thought is to anything, even if it's just the feeling of your fingers rubbing together, starts to give you some level of ability and agility to have an understanding of what's happening inside of you as you relate to life. So
Yep.
then you take that to a live conversation with someone. Then if you're practicing that on a regular basis, as you're in a conversation and dialogue with someone, especially if it's kind of charged and emotional and about some current topic, more than likely your filters are going to be there. I mean, my wife and I just did this the other night. We had a conversation, and she was like, "Wow, like you're really charged about that." I'm like, "I am," like I was really kind of worked up. And
oh, let's go.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing was within, because I do the same thing. I've called her out at times. We have an established level of trust, which is also huge for
Huge.
intense conversations.
And that actually, I'm going to make a note to come back to that. So keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. But the biggest thing is that whether it's a beloved next to you that helps us see when we're kind of listening to a filter, there's also full responsibility on ourselves. So sometimes when I'm listening to a YouTube, interview with someone or something on Facebook, and someone's like, "Oh my God, can you see this crazy? You got to check this out." Like the other day, a childhood friend of mine forwarded. It was an interview with Charles Barkley and whomever the guy is that coined and started the whole alt-right political movement.
Oh, my.
Stephen something.
Between the two of them?
Yeah, it was the two of them and some other. I think he was a lawyer. I forgot what his title was, but there was two African American men in this white American, alt-right. Some people might throw a slam of like kind of neo-Nazi-ish, but I mean, this dude was so in the pocket.
But they are extremists, aren't they? All right.
Completely extremists.
Yeah.
So extreme that at one point, one of the other African American men said, "I want you to understand, you've got kids, I've got kids. Like, here's a similarity. We want the same thing for ourselves and for our family. And we want to pursue that thing that is in the Declaration of Independence, right? To the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness." To which this guy responded, "Oh, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, like that's not for everyone." Like, he's like, to me, those words are kind of faggy. And I was like, are you kidding me?
That word?
Yeah, he used that word. And I was, so I just in terms of illustrating the filters that we listen through, in that moment, I was ready to throw my computer across the room, right? Like, I didn't want to listen to him anymore.
Yeah.
And I was so aware of the filter of judgment that came up. I was so aware of the filter of like, I went into a complete binary, right and wrong, good and bad, black and white sort of dualistic space. And I just kind of had to breathe through it, because my intention going into that was like, I really wanted to hear where this guy was coming from. I wanted to understand what was going on for him. Like, I just don't understand how someone can have that mindset today. But the thing, being able to stay with that and breathe and stay present to it, the thing that I walked away with, and I don't know if he would ever admit to this, but there was so much fear in him. Like, he basically said, "I'm 100% aware of the privilege that I have, and I don't want that privilege taken away."
Yep.
And in his mind, there was kind of only an either or. Like, if my privilege isn't there, then I'm going to be stepped on, and I'm not going to have any sort of balance or equality in the world. So if it's got to be one of us, it's going to be me. Screw all you other people.
Yep. Do you think that's prevalent, Daryl? Do you think that whether someone's got the privilege and they want to keep it, or someone doesn't and they want it, and the whole idea of privilege is a broad conversation, but how much does the ego play into just being a human being and want what's yours to be safe?
Yeah, I think it plays everything into it. I mean, it's regardless of where you land on the spectrum of belief, ego is huge. I mean, you can't deny that it's a part of who we are and what informs.
So are you saying that meditation, though, can maybe mitigate isn't the right word, but at least kind of have us be aware of how we're triggered, or whether we're on one extreme or another, or kind of find ourselves toward the middle of the spectrum, that we can still be mindful of where we are?
Yes, I 100%. I believe that is what it's all about. Because here's one of the biggest misconceptions, misnomers, misunderstandings, I believe, about spiritual practice in particular, and about what it means to walk a conscious life, whether you call it spiritual or not. There is an assumption that if I read enough, and this is back to this kind of data intellect world that we live in. If I read enough, if I have enough data, if I have enough facts, then there's going to be this click inside of me that puts me at this level of understanding. and I'm just going to be able to operate from that mindset perpetually, right? So if and that kind of relates to the ego, right?
Yeah.
If I study enough, if I pray enough, if I meditate enough, then my ego is going to be this thing that doesn't really play into my experience. I'm not going to be judgmental. I'm not going to be so concerned about what people think of me. That's crap. Like, the ego is not going away. It is part of who we are. It's part of what makes us great. It's what gives us personality. It's what makes us attractive to our friends, family, partners, and everyone. And to try to get rid of that, to me, is literally trying to kill a part of yourself. And if that's the only thing that's running the show, that's where people get into trouble, right? So to have the conversation that I've been having on Sunday talks and in situations like this is really bringing back that notion of, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And neither one of them is greater than the other. Both of them need to be in the forefront, in the center of who we are. And so as we do spiritual practice, that is not necessarily about uplifting the human component, that ego part of us. If we can keep that present and forward on the proverbial stove of what we're cooking with, as the ego comes forward, as the humanist comes forward, as some sort of like crazy thing out of left field, like a George Floyd incident that just explodes in the country, we're going to be really, really, really pulled into that egoic experience. We're going to be pulled into our own humanness. It's so sensational and it's so attractive, and that's okay. But can we bring our spirit with us? And I believe, I don't know if mitigate's the right word. I use that word a lot, but it's not about mitigating the ego, but it is about informing a new relationship with the ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people see that egoic sense of wellness as almost like, death and living. So for someone like this guy on the alt-right, his, I'll just own my judgment of it, but what I perceive is that his understanding, his reality is based upon his ego's wellness and safety. And his ego's wellness and safety exists only in this dualistic thing of there's someone with power and someone that gets stepped on. I have been someone with power. I realize I have privilege because of that. And I do not want any of that power taken away from me. I do not want to let go of that privilege. And, and so seeing the world through that, when you have affirmative action, when you have Black Lives Matter, when you have anything that says, well, let's just bring these other folks up into the conversation of possibility, then it looks like, but that doesn't happen. There isn't a rising up and a coming together. As one rises, something has to go down. And so he hears, I'm going to have my power taken away from me. I'm going to have my what I understand as my privilege and my right to work, breathe, and do the way that I want to. Somehow that's going to be taken away from me. So if you're going to take from me, you better believe you're up for a fight. And it's just sad, but that's fear, right? That's the thing driving it. He's scared. And that was my takeaway from that conversation. As crazy as it was, I can forward you the link if you want to watch it later. It's really intense. It's only about 7 or 8 minutes long.
Well, say it for the folks that are listening right now. What's the link? Do you know it by heart, or is it just?
I don't.
Okay. Well, we'll see what we can do to get it brought up on our webpage and things. Yeah. But I want to go back to trust, the idea of trust. I won't listen to somebody if I don't trust them, generally speaking. Like if I guess I won't take something, let me requalify that. I won't take something to heart unless I trust them. I'll listen, but I think it's also in the communication that I begin to trust somebody, in the listening. And if I know somebody's authentically sharing, then I start to trust them. And then we can start to have an authentic dialogue about some things, or a real talk, like, this is what's really on my heart, and this is why. Not from a place of ignorance. I mean, I may be ignorant about what I'm talking about, but I really believe in it. But if there's an authentic conversation, how does trust play into that? As far as being able to, like, if my daughter didn't trust me, I wouldn't be able to parent her. Right. We've seen it over and over again. And I know it's a different relationship, but you know, if the kid doesn't trust their mom or their dad, well, screw you, I'm not going to listen to you. You know, but then we can parent and we can guide if there's trust there. What do we have to do to establish trust? Is it as simple as listening?
I think it's an important component of it. It's not the only thing. Trust for me is it's so critical, and it's a principle. So it doesn't matter what the relationship, whether it is a father and daughter, whether it's two portions of a community, if it's a minister and a congregant, if it's an employer and an employee, if it's a manager and a team member, like those, it's all about relationship. And when one of my favorite kind of like more spiritual ceremonies or rituals that I love to participate in are weddings. And not every single couple does some sort of, premarital coaching with me. But those that do, I'm always so excited, or at least that they do something with someone. Because the conversation there to me is about trust. And it's not about anything needing to change in the dynamics of their relationship necessarily, but getting really clear, do you really trust one another? Because the trust enables life to happen. And what I mean by that is life is not going to stay even keel, right? We always talk about that change is the only thing that is perpetual. So if change is always going to happen, sometimes that change is going to be easy. And in those moments, it's easy. But then the moments where change happens and it's challenging and it's hard, whether it is some sort of challenge to that trust, then, or at least a perceived challenge to that trust, if there isn't already trust established, then oftentimes that's what breaks things, right? And I think that is, in terms of our country right now, there isn't a whole lot of trust between, in particular, the Black community and our law enforcement. And it's not just the Black community, it's transcended that now, because it's been this barrage of images and incidents of where there's been this kind of like misuse of power on, in particular, people of color when it comes to policing. And so it was kind of like there was trust there, but then the trust got broken down a little bit. Then it got broken down a little bit more. Then it got broken down a little bit more. And each time that erodes away, it's like a foundation of a home. If you don't shore it up, then eventually the home's going to fall or slide, or something significant is going to happen, and it's not inhabitable. And so our relationships, we want them to be habitable, and trust is the thing that needs to be constantly given attention. You're building trust with your daughter right now, because what's going to happen is as she gets older, she's going to move literally further away from you, emotionally, psychologically, and at some point physically.
Don't bring it up. Trying to make me cry? Why don't bring that up right now?
But it's that whole thing of like, the kid that I mean, it's kind of the worst nightmare I think of most parents is like, their kid around that junior high school age, they're going to go to a party, they're going to go to some place where something could possibly happen that's not great. And people want to control that situation ever coming to pass. But the truth is that situation is going to come to pass. What you want to have is trust established before they get there, so that they feel comfortable coming back to you saying, I screwed up, or maybe they weren't directly a part of it, but they're like, something happened at the party and it freaked me out and I want to talk to you about it. But most oftentimes there hasn't been a deep level of trust established in that relationship because they're fear of retribution. So that same thing happens in any relationship. Father, daughter, community, husband, wife, wife, whatever the dynamic is, trust is trust is trust. And if trust is starting to be eroded, or it's got a couple of cracks in it, then it needs attention. And to me, listening is a huge part of it. I was just sharing the other day, a white counterpart of mine said, what can I do to my Black brothers and sisters and people of color? And I said, well, that question sometimes doesn't serve you, right? Like, I'm not going to take offense to that right now, But if you were to walk up to someone in particular that maybe you don't have a deep relationship with, and you're just like on a panel discussion and you're like, tell me as a Black person, what should I do? It's like, it's not necessarily going to establish trust.
Yeah.
But if you were to first say to someone, especially if you don't know them well, tell me a little bit about your experience of being a person of color in this country, if you feel comfortable. Like, what was a hardship like? When did you experience race? And because obviously I don't experience it the same way as you do. I want to understand it. And then in that question, and then subsequently listening to what they share to you, and not jumping in and saying, oh yeah, that happened to me once, or my friend told me about that. No, listening to the entire story.
Yep.
The foundation of trust is starting to be built upon. And that's creating powerful relationship so that more and more trust can be built. And then as challenge comes into the relationship, that trust is not all of a sudden eroded by one thing. It'll stand the test of time. And
Amen.
listening is a huge trust builder.
How did your pops influence? Trey, can we bring that picture back up one more time? How did your pops influence your life and your ministry? I know he was widely and well respected in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And how did he influence your thinking, your life, your commitment, your ministry? Are you a third generation minister or second generation? Was his father a minister as well?
No, he was not. I'm just a second generation.
Okay.
But like Carrie always jokes whenever we've had family reunions. She's like, he's got a whole family of ministers. Like, my cousin's a minister, my cousin's a music minister, the other minister. It's like everybody goes to church. Everyone's doing something in the spirit.
Hey, Trey, can you make that a little bit bigger on the screen? Is there a way so we can see there? There we go. A little bit more. There we go.
So
the last memory I have of your pops was at your wedding, and he was the last. Your mom and your dad were the last two, well, other than you and your wife, on the.
That's right. We were dancing to Thriller at like 12:30 in the morning, doing the dance scenes.
So what did he do for your heart? How did he and your mom's beautiful, and she's grieving about the passing of your father right now.
Yeah.
And had some health challenges, and God bless, she's surrounded by community. But your dad is a minister, and your folks, how have they influenced your ministry and your heart and how you meet?
So the biggest thing is,
go ahead and bring it down, Ray. Thank you.
It was all about community for my dad and for my mother, all about community. And what that looked like, and it was so amazing. I have to, just to, not again, I don't feel like I have to well, I'm just gonna say it. This is not from an egoic space that I'm bragging about who my father was. It's an illustration.
Yeah, just say it.
So I was so grateful in terms of when he passed away. It was right before the shelter in place lockdown. So he was able to have a full funeral memorial experience. And over like 600 to 700 people came.
Yeah.
I mean, there were, the viewing happened 2 hours, started 2 hours before the actual ceremony. So I think that there could have been more than 700 there, because some people just had to go back to work or whatever. It was on a Friday. And I knew how much my father was involved in the community, but it was so palpable because, I mean, people from all walks of life, people that some of them I didn't even know. I mean, in terms of how my father touched people. But the illustration and the proof in the pudding of the importance of building rapport in the community was that day for me. And, someone coming up and going, when I first moved here, your father came and knocked on my door. He had this whole thing about wanting to welcome people to the neighborhood. And it wasn't trying to get them to come to his church. He would have like a brown bag, and maybe there was like, some popcorn, some water, the latest newspaper or something else, like he just had a couple of things. And of course he had some literature in there about the congregation that he was working with. But his whole thing was, I want people to know that they are welcomed into the community, that they are seen, and that I want them to see me as a friend and a partner and a fellow community member that they can say hello to, lean into
Yep.
however they want to.
Just
And
as a resource, as a place of comfort.
as a place of comfort, as a resource, and just as a friend. I mean, over and over and over again, the same words came out of the mouth for so many people, where they would say, when I first came into this community, your father was one of the first people that came and either called me, knocked on my door, came to one of my events, and I will never ever forget that.
Mm.
And from that moment forward, we always, we'd have lunch once a quarter. We'd have a phone call here and there. And it was immediate community, but by the nature of my father being involved in like 3 or 4 different denominations in the Protestant tradition of Christianity. I mean, my mom still has his phone active right now because she just isn't ready to let that go. But
Yep.
He's still getting phone calls from people,
Wow.
And my mom will remember, oh yeah, there was so-and-so in California. I don't know if they know your father passed away. Let me call them. So there's still this like deep community. And I mean, it's so informed what I do that I sometimes don't even think about it. It's one of those like fish in the water sort of thing,
Yeah.
My mother is retired now, but she was a nurse and RN, and she would do her floor work, but then she was always interested in doing something to promote wellness and health awareness in the community. So she would do diabetes, groups in the church basement. She was a lactation consultant, so she would go out into the community and talk to mothers. Actually, the whole reason that my parents really knew one another is that the nursing that my mom did, this was in New Haven, Connecticut. The nursing that my mom did was in a community where my dad had established a nonprofit to help low-income families just kind of live a little bit better. And so she was doing in-home nursing visits and going into the sectors of the community that were not able to access, either because they didn't have the means to travel to a doctor's office, or just in terms of education and the lack thereof, didn't really put their wellness and wellness visits first. So she was going into projects and super, low income communities that were completely not given any attention to. And they started to literally cross paths because it was the same communities that they were involved in. So both of them operated from the space of, we need to go out to the community and do something to connect with them, as opposed to say, you should come to us, which is also an invitation, but it's got to be an energetic of going out and really inviting. And that is everything. Everyone wants to be invited to something, right? Everyone, when you get an invitation in the mail or something, an Evite, you're like, oh man, I'm getting invited to something. And it could be to like so-and-so's, 13, graduation from kindergarten, which is like, okay, but it's still, you're still excited for a hot second that it's an invitation. Everyone loves to get invited to something. So the power of us, in particular as leaders in communities, the power of welcoming an invitation, but it doesn't even have to be leaders in the community. I'm thinking of my sister-in-law moved here a few years ago from California in LA, and they moved into the closest northern suburb here called Evanston, which is kind of this, it's not utopic, but it's Northwestern there. So it's a very college, it's a very diverse community, very open thinkers, but it's very Midwestern in terms of the ideal of like being neighborly. And I mean, they barely got half of their truck unloaded, and there were like 6 different neighbors that came up to them with like homemade cakes and pastries. And they said, if you ever need us to watch your daughter while you're doing stuff. And
that still happens? That stuff still happens?
It still happens. And she was like, wherever she grew up in LA, she was like, that doesn't happen. Like, that was amazing.
No.
And so these were just neighbors that lived down the street, and the power of someone coming up and saying hello, extending their hand and welcoming them into the space, that established some amazing trust just on her block in terms of care and safety. And
there's no conversation about what's your political affiliation, where do you go to church? It's just humanity, right? Just like one human to another human.
Right.
Yeah.
And to have that connection that is not about, what do you, I think it's one of the reasons why people say when you're in social settings, don't talk about religion and politics, because those are things that kind of put people into that space of either or defensiveness. I do think people should talk about it.
Agreed.
But not from the space of like, I need to convince you or find fault in what you believe, but can I understand about the community member that's in front of me?
Different level of maturity, actually. As soon as I said that, I was thinking, it's like, what would it be if you came up and, just to somebody and said, well, somebody's moving into the neighborhood. Well, hey, welcome. My name's, whatever, John, and I support President Trump. And you're like, okay, well, I don't. And they're like, well, you want to have dinner later?
Yeah.
Like real maturity, like the ability to reconcile somehow. That seems to be a word that's on the forefront, is just to reconcile ourselves so it's not so black and white.
Yeah.
Not even gray, but like the united colors of Benetton in between all of it.
Mm-hmm. This is something that not everyone likes when I say it, or I think maybe agrees with, but I'm really challenging, because I've been challenging myself with this idea as it relates to having trust, the ability to listen, and in particular, come into conversations about race right now in our community. There is so much shame and baggage around the word racist. It's almost like the word racist is the equivalent of the N-word. I feel like if a person of Anglo, Euro, a white American is called a racist,
White,
that is the equivalent of calling someone, the N-word. That's a person of color. And
from whose perspective? From the white person's perspective, or?
Yes, at least the reaction that I see when someone, but the thing is, here's the thing, is that half the time no one's calling anyone a racist, but if someone gets called out or questions, well, why did you say this, or why did you do that, or I don't like it when you say that, someone will go, but I'm not a racist. It's like, well, hold on, no one called you a racist. But the truth of the matter is, I believe everyone's racist, including myself. Because of that whole thing that we talked about, the ego, we have bias, and we step into every single situation with preconceived notions and ideas about ourselves and others, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's religious or spiritual beliefs. We have preconceived notions. Most of them are unconscious, and they come to fruition when we get engaged with it. The challenge is that no one wants to hear that they're biased. No one wants to hear that they have preconceived notions and ideas about the other person that they're talking to. And we equate having those preconceived notions and ideas to being a bad person. And in actuality, all it means is you're human.
Yep.
Thing is we have to check our humanness with our spiritual nature. And it's that practice that allows us to not act from a space of our unconscious humanness. But if we aren't willing to own that, then the dialogues and conversations that we need to have right now that we think are going to change, they're not really going to do anything but propagate more of the same thing.
I bring everything back to parenting. I love that so much. It's, what if, so my daughter's, just came out of first grade.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't a whole lot of education going on except at home. So, hey, 3 + 3 is 9. She comes in not knowing 3 + 3 is, and then the teacher, hey, 3 + 3 is 9.
Right.
3 + 3 is 9. Wrong, bad, like. So, can there be room for us to learn? Can there be, because there's a lot of, how many things am I ignorant to? A gazillion.
Lots.
a gazillion things that I'm ignorant to.
Mhm.
And then I agree, we shame each other about, well, you should know, but I don't. So, let me get some education. Let me, whatever it is. Shame's a big one of them. I love coming back to the movie. I don't want to get too far off, but I think it's the same thing. The movie The Edge, where Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin and a couple other cats, they're lost out in the wilderness, and Anthony Hopkins says, you know why people die when they're lost? Shame. Because they don't do the one thing they think they can do, which is to think.
Yeah.
To actually start to, thinking also is getting educated. Thinking is, where are my surroundings? Thinking is, who am I? What's my history? And where are we going? Things like that. So
Right.
I love that you said that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I really, it's something I don't hear it tons. And I think it's probably just the influence of the circle of people that I've created around me. But it's
By the way, I say 3 + 3 is 9. I meant 3 × 3 is 9.
I know. I was doing math and I was like checking myself. I'm like, wait.
So you go back, Charles. Go back. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
But it's okay for people to say shame on you, right? Shame on you. Like they want to wave their finger, whether it's at Trump or some other governmental figure. They want to shame them. Shame doesn't do anything to grow anything. Shame kills everything and everyone. And I love, if you're familiar with Brene Brown, I don't know if it's originally from her, but it's where I've heard this teaching around the idea of guilt and shame. And we are all guilty of things every single day. And guilt is nothing more. Did you do this? Yes, right? So am I guilty of having bias? 100%, right? I have bias from my experience on the planet of who I am and my family, my relationships, my experiences, my age, the region of the country that I grew up in, all of that. I am guilty of bias. Shame, though, is this idea of, because of our bias or because of our beliefs or because of whatever act, word that we are guilty of, shame goes to the place of fundamentally making you bad or wrong, right? Like
the idea of original sin in Catholicism, the idea of original sin.
Yeah, like
you're bad no matter what, you're bad.
Yeah, you're fundamentally broken and there's nothing coming back from that. So to basically tell someone that they are fundamentally broken and there's nothing coming back from that, that's where, when we get into that race conversation and someone either tries to jump around and prove that they're not racist, the bottom line is whoever is saying that is guilty of probably having a racist thought, maybe making a racist comment, or unconsciously by their inaction or not raising their voice in the past have been somehow implicit to the racial challenge in this country. But it doesn't mean that they're fundamentally a racist. It doesn't mean that they're fundamentally broken and there's nothing coming back from it. That was just an incident or a time that they were guilty of bias and racism in their life. And if we can humble ourselves enough to own that, and that's when you can grow and build from something. And that, to me, establishes trust. When someone comes up to me, when my wife and I have a disagreement about something, and one of us comes back to the other and goes, you know what? I was an ass. I was wrong. All I want to do is wrap my arms and legs around her and just get as close as I can to her. It has reaffirmed trust. It has reestablished love. It has reconnected to our spirit, the spirit that brought us together as a couple. And it's the same in the community. If someone was to come out and say, you know what, I'm guilty of this. I was unconscious of this. I didn't understand the impact of my action or lack thereof and how that influenced your living and your life in this community. Yeah. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, talk about a salve or a balm in Gilead. Healing would explode in this country if
I feel that talking about it. Yeah. So the word that comes up for me is humility. It takes a tremendous amount of humility, just self-awareness and humility. Yeah. Hey, what time is it? Where are we? Are
We're coming up on the hour.
Can we, Carrie?
You want her in here?
Yeah, can we do a little keyboard? Can you guys harmonize? And Daryl, so here's the thing, Daryl, and they haven't done it in a few years, so this is me pitching to them right now. They used to call my voicemail, maybe on my birthday or for some other time out of nowhere, and leave the most beautiful harmonies on my voicemail if I didn't answer. These extraordinary, I'm not even gonna try. Charles, we love you, you know, these beautiful. Can we, is she in the house? Can we find her? Can you guys?
Yeah, give me just a hot second.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'll be right back. You're gonna see my orange shorts. Hey-o.
Hey, orange shorts. Yeah, you've had those for a long time. I love them. Center for Spiritual Living Palm Desert and beyond. Any questions? Any comments before Reverend Daryl comes back? Anybody? Is anybody there this morning? I hope you're there. This feels like some really good conversation. Where is she? Yeah, get in here, girl. Oh, I saw her. Oh, there's mom.
Yep.
Is mom coming in too? Hey.
Who wants to listen? Let's just do one pass.
Okay.
Lovely.
Can you come? Hey, Carrie, your beautiful face is right behind mine and my little screen. Can you come over behind, just next to the wall, next to Daryl?
Yes.
Oh, you. Oh, can you get through there?
Okay.
There she is.
Hi.
So they had the most beautiful wedding. Where was it? The Santa Rosa Mountains? What are they called?
It was Santa Cruz.
Santa Cruz.
Santa Cruz.
In SoCal, yeah.
It was just it was a magical weekend. We were a bunch of elves just hanging out in the woods and having some fun. Oh, hold on, did a comment just come up? Let me see what's going on. Let's see. Great conversation. Thanks for sharing. Great conversation. How can we hear more of Reverend Daryl? Do you have a blog, a website, anything where you're making offerings?
Sure. There's a couple of places.
Your Instagram page.
The best, yeah, I do a lot of linking for my Instagram page, which is Daryl Jones Spirit. I speak once a month here in Chicago at a place called Cityside Spiritual Community.
Okay.
And I helped launch a meditation studio, which is now a meditation app called Chill Anywhere, and guide more. I mean, they touch the spirit, but the intention is that it's a secular practice so that everyone feels welcome.
Yep.
We do classes every single day of the week live through the app, and we also have a whole catalog of recorded content as well. So
cool.
those are some specific ways. Maybe after this, I can send over specific links if you want to post them in the.
Absolutely, send us some stuff, and we'll make sure that folks know where to find you. Okay. So as we get to the top of the hour, would you pretend you just called my phone? All right.
And this is talking about when we would sing "Happy Birthday."
Oh yeah. Okay.
And then I'd replay the voicemail like 20 times because it was so beautiful. Would you let me see if is there a few more? Hold on, let me see if there's another comment or two here before we sing it out. Lots to think about. Thank you, Reverend Daryl. Feeling uplifted. Thank you. I feel so grateful. If this conversation continues, I'm feeling that too. I think we could keep going a while. Awesome. Which is, we have an opening. Hey, I've got an opening on July 2nd. You want to join me? Put you on the spot.
What day of the week is
Thursday.
That? I think I can do it.
Yes, more Reverend Daryl. Yes,
we're going to be driving.
If we do it.
Yeah. I might have to do it from the car.
Is it it's a Wednesday or a Thursday? I think
it's a Thursday. Yeah, for sure.
We'll
I may have to do it from the car.
But from the car?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just put the keyboard in the car.
Yeah.
Sit in the back seat while Carrie's driving. Okay.
Right.
We got to wrap it up to honor everybody's time, but
Right.
Before you do, I want your voice to be the last. So some couple of announcements real quick, and then Reverend Daryl and Carrie are going to be the last voices we hear. We continue to appreciate community, your financial contribution to the center. The building's been closed for a while. The message is not. The building's closed, the center's wide open. As you know, that we do stuff every day at 10 o'clock. We've got our meditation tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We've got Father's Day service. And then if you turn into the Father's Day service, we've got a whole slate of magnificent offerings next week as well. So I think Jeff or Trey is probably going to put up on the screen here pretty soon how you can contribute to the center. You can text in a tithe. You can the QR code. I'm not sure if that's going to be up there. Call the center, send a check. All of those things. We continue to welcome your contributions and are very grateful for them. And so once Reverend Daryl and Carrie are done, we're just going to sign off. So let's just give Reverend Daryl some love. Thank you so much for being present. Thank you. What a gift, my brother. And to see your face. And I used to rub that head all the time. It just is magic. Yeah.
It's a good head to rub.
Carrie, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, take us home.
I know it fills Daryl's soul as much as it fills yours and everyone listening. So it's awesome
Amen.
you guys get to do this.
So much.
Yeah.
So I just have to give props. We may have to post the credit of this later, but there's I don't know if it's a Unity Church, but it's Reverend Greg Stumper, I believe, or Stamper, wrote this song. They're in New York, and it's a song called Grateful, and it's like a prayer to end in some gratitude.
Let's hear it.
Grateful, I am grateful, I am grateful. Grateful, I am grateful, I am grateful. My gift to you is gratitude. Oh, yes, I'm grateful. Oh, yes, I'm grateful. Grateful, I am grateful, I am grateful. Grateful, I am grateful, I am grateful. My gift to you is gratitude. Oh, yes, I'm grateful. Oh, yes, I'm grateful.
There you go.
Grateful, grateful. Yes, I'm grateful.
Carrie needs her own show. Let's get her a show. God bless you guys. I love
Love
you.
you all.
Love you.
Much love. And there's Charlie. Peace, Charlie.
Charlie Bear. When we sing, he thinks it's time for play.